About 3 years ago, I joined a team at Airbnb that was created to move beyond responsive design to a more adaptive design that was tailored to the capabilities of mobile devices. These mobile devices were starting to have things like notches, but today we start to see devices that are able to fold, that are able to open into a tablet experience, all sorts of different experiences that we need to design for. The team that I joined, we built an app shell, we built push notifications and service worker support. We built virtual keyboard adaptation and environmental safe area support. We built cross-browser support and so many things. These created a really strong foundation for us to build on. Today I'm really excited to share 3 new pillars of our PWA that we've been working and experimenting on and enabling a new class of user experience for our users. We'll also finish up by taking a quick look at how to build a persuasive business use case and presenting these concepts to leadership. The first of these pillars that we want to talk about is around building a fluid user experience. Fluid user experiences are about being adaptive to devices, by taking things like safe areas into account, by adding high-quality transitions that convey a sense of connection. Capabilities and APIs over the past few years have matured so much that making these experiences that were once almost impossible to do unless you had a large team are now a lot easier. I want to talk about one upcoming new browser API that's especially been useful for us, and that's an API called Shared Element Transitions. Shared Element Transitions is one of the new APIs we're using to help make view-to-view transitions easier in our experimentation. Implementing the view-to-view transitions that you see here took just a few days after getting familiar with the API. Before we jump into the actual shape of the API and how it works, it's important for me to mention that this API is still under heavy development and will likely change significantly. With that, let's dive into some of the code. What you see here is a simple reveal left animation. Shared element transitions actually support many different types, and that's outside the scope of this, but for this particular talk, we'll talk about reveal left, cover left, and a few of the other variants that help convey a sense of navigating forwards and backwards. Shared element transitions also supports a very asynchronous nature. This is really helpful for us. We do a lot of navigation, we have large teams that we work with, and they don't always talk to each other or are well integrated. So being able to fire off the start of a transition and then the finalization of it in 2 separate steps is really quite useful when we're working with things like React Router and Vue Router. In this particular example for the code, you can see that the time between calling prepare and recalling start allows us to change. And so in this case, we're going to change the actual URL. We're going to navigate to a new page, we're going to reset the scroll position to the top, and we're going to wait for that element to become visible before we call start. Once we call start, we're also able to call other APIs like Houdini transitions or regular CSS transitions, even things like haptic feedback. There's one other element of the Shared Element Transitions API that we haven't covered, and that's actually the shared elements aspect of it. And so let's look and see how we can do shared elements as part of the API. Here we can see as we navigate from view to view that the title stays in place, but the content of the views themselves are imploding in. This gives a sense to the user as they go from section to section of the app that they're still within the context of the application. So the page marquee or title, as well as each of the tabs in this, are our shared elements. And for us, we only need to pass in the selectors for those, and then we're able to actually have them be animated. As long as we use the same selector, the API will know whether to keep the element in the same place or transition it to the new place and state on the screen. We can specify durations and easing curves to do a whole range of animations. We talked a little bit about how easy it is to integrate in with other APIs, and so I want to talk about another exciting API that enables us to do some really incredible visual animation, and it's called the CSS Properties and Values API Level 1, but most folks just call it Houdini. This specialized container you see on the left was developed as part of a hackathon. It animates previously difficult properties like colors and linear gradients. It makes extensive use of registered properties and basic CSS and transitions. For the color animations you see here, we use a registered property and HSL values. two things that are readily available in browsers today. As you can see, we have a few different classes on this code. As we apply the active transition and backdraft disabled class, we can see that the background color smoothly transitions to a 75% lightness version. If you could see your profiling as this happens, you would notice that we do this at a very smooth 60 frames per second with no visual jank. This is super powerful. This opens up many options that we haven't had available on the web before. Let's switch gears now and talk a little bit about immersive feedback that isn't visual, but can be extremely powerful when used appropriately. That feedback is haptic feedback. Haptic feedback should only be used to indicate to users that a key action is either beginning or completing. Some examples might include things like choosing to complete a search or to book a booking. It's always really important for us to provide an opt-out for folks. If folks don't want to experience haptic feedback, we should provide a way for them not to. And we should also only initiate haptic feedback in response to user input. So now that we've covered so many techniques in making a fluid user experience, let's move on to our next pillar, and that's adaptive installation experiences. Adaptive installation experiences builds upon the current manifest capabilities we have today, and by implementing a few extra fields such as screenshots or categories and other supplementary fields in our manifest file, we're able to opt into a high-quality OS and device-dependent installation experience. On the left here, you can see an example of how Airbnb's mobile web app might be installed for a user. This is currently supported on Chrome and Edge on both desktop and mobile on Android devices and Windows and OS X, as well as Chromebooks. iOS also allows an installation in its Add to Home Screen functionality. Firefox also allows this installation on Android as well. A high-quality installation experience is important. It's important because it allows folks to engage with our app as a normal app. It's not just a web app, and the great part about it is it's installed instantly. It's able to maintain all of your current context, like local storage, or whether a user is currently logged in with their cookies. That's a big difference from most native apps where it's very difficult to maintain that context from going from a web to installation to opening. And one of the things that can differentiate our progressive web experience. Another thing that can differentiate that is App Store integration. App stores are something that has typically only been for native apps in the past. But now we're starting to get to a day where things like the Windows Store supports PWAs by default, where we can install PWAs into Chromebooks and Samsung stores and many other places. This is a way for us to get a larger audience than we've ever been able to achieve on the web, and makes a really sticky experience. When we start talking about the possibility of desktop PWAs, it gets to be a really exciting possibility for integrating into Windows or Chromebook, and it doesn't have to compete with your native apps. So with that, let's move on to our third pillar, and that's our offline capable arrival guide. Our offline capable arrival guide is really important, and not just because we're a travel site. We actually really need this for users to be able to check in really well. Having an offline capable arrival guide can be the difference between a smooth check-in and a really adventurous, challenging check-in where you're running around with your phone in like Lake Tahoe during the snow, trying to find a check-in code, trying to get that one bar of coverage so you can get into an Airbnb, get your Wi-Fi, and get in front of a fireplace. So it's important, as you see through here, to highlight on these offline capable experiences what's available and what's not available. In our case, messaging is not available, and so we've dimmed that out. We hope to make it available in the future, but as of today, it's not. And so we don't want users to try to go through an experience that will surface errors or incorrect behavior and have a poor user experience. So even though the inbox is disabled, we still have full access to the offline arrival guide, and importantly, our check-in code and Wi-Fi codes. That way, we don't have to worry about running around in the middle of a snowstorm trying to find one bar of signal. So with that, let's switch over and talk a little bit more about business use cases. All of this kind of functionality can seem like it's on the cutting edge, can seem like it's very new, and sometimes it can be really difficult to sell this to our leadership teams. So let's talk about how we can sell these different things to our leadership. One way is through expanded reach. Through offering installations like we talked about earlier on the Windows Store or Chromebooks or any of these others, this increases the exposure of our progressive web apps to allow more app installs. We can also increase user engagement with all of our animations and keeping folks engaged. We can get more sales, more bookings, more engagement for all of our users by doing this. The final thing is that investing in PWA means more investment in the web in general and a better overall user experience. I'd love to talk a little bit more about reduced uninstalls as well due to app storage issues. PWAs generally have much less requirements as far as storage. They also perform really well on lower-end devices. Many times, native apps will only work on the latest few versions of an OS release, whereas a PWA can work far longer and on lower-end devices. The final thing that we have an opportunity on is marketing a light experience. For some companies, this is the right move to offer another app where you can install it through an app store, through trusted web activities or such. That's always a decision to the business and your specific use cases. So these are a few things that can help us sell our different decisions to leadership and market new experiences and create better experiences and have more investment into the web. I want to thank you today for joining me. My name is Callie Riggins. I'm a staff software engineer at Airbnb. Please join us for the Q&A to follow, where we're excited to share some of our recent experiments and developments in PWAs. Thank you.